Hi everyone, my name is Tiffany Jull. I'm one of the psychologists here at the Waterloo Region District School Board, and I will allow my colleague to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is Alexis Cantafio. I'm a practicum student with the WRDSB, and I'm also in my second year of my master's in clinical psychology at the University of Waterloo. So I'm really excited to be here today and speak with everyone. So this is our third session in a series on screens, and the previous sessions focused on the role of dopamine and the way that youth interact with screens. So whether they're interacting with the screens actively or passively, as well as engaging in pro-social or anti-social behaviors online. And so these sessions were recorded and are on the WRDSB Psychology YouTube channel. And there were also two previous sessions posted from previous years that are included in this playlist about screen use. And so the session today will focus on how screens are used at different developmental stages, and we're going to offer some strategies to manage screen use based on these developmental stages. The last session, which will be next week, will pull all of this together and offer some considerations and an approach for applying this information in your life and in your home. And so the point of this talk today is really just to outline some small changes you can look for in your child without placing blame or shame on yourself. So the reality for all of us is that screens are everywhere. They're a part of our day-to-days in some capacity. So we really just want to, as we're learning about screens and their impacts and some of the obstacles that we're facing with them, just to share this information so you can look for these things and try to implement ways to navigate them with yourself and with your kids and teach your kids the skills to help navigate these challenges. So Tiffany, you can go to the next slide.
So I'm going to just highlight that I normally should say this at the start. I have two kids who are 15 and 17. So although I've worked for the school board for over 25 years, I also have lived this as a parent, and I've learned a lot about technology over the last few months. Well, since COVID, let's be honest. But the core of the content we're using today was inspired by a session that I attended with a number of colleagues from the board by this gentleman, Jake Ernst, who is a social worker in Toronto. He was brought in by School Mental Health Ontario and Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto to provide a full day, 9 to 4 in July. Online, of course. And so we learned a ton. And so that led us to want to pull chunks from it to be able to provide to our board and the caregivers and families and schools we support. And so, with credit to Jake, this is one of the pieces that really stood out for me in thinking about the developmental course and how screens are interacting. And the reason I mention I have kids is that my kids were in grade 4 and 5 when COVID hit, when we shut down. And I look back on some of the choices I made, and I know we were all living through it and doing the best we could. And I have some regrets, I'll be honest. And I just don't want that to be the case today. Please know that we are outlining the development and key developmental milestones through the ages so that you can see maybe where you're wondering for your child. What are the skills you're worrying about? And what are your considerations with how technology is brought in? Because the reality is, it's everywhere. And during the day, at home, no, sorry, in our workplace and at school, there are screens, and that is a bit of a discomfort for me that I'm here as a board staff. And I know that families ask me all the time about screens in schools. And so we are not going to be addressing that at this stage. I don't have any control over that. And so we want to just talk about what are the key learnings for each age and how can we think about screens in that context. Alexis, I went totally off script there.
All good, all good. So the first developmental stage that we'll be talking about today is the infant and toddler stage. And so this is really a time where children are using nonverbal or learning nonverbal strategies to interact with others. So starting to smile and use eye contact, and they're really learning through watching and copying others. And they're also starting to learn about their impact on the world. So if I do X, Y will happen. If I press this button on a toy, this will happen. And so with these developmental aspects, they're looking for more independence from their caregivers. And so screens can interrupt these fundamental learning milestones. So interrupting language development as well as social and emotional skills that they're going to find from human interactions with their caregivers or other individuals. Screens at this stage can also impact the sleep cycle and vision, so specifically resulting in short-sightedness, so not being able to see something clearly unless it's right close to their eyes. It also affects the development of attention control, things like emotion regulation, as well as flexible thinking and problem solving. And this is due to that reduced exploration and social interactions that they wouldn't be getting if they're on screens a lot or there's a lot of screens around them. So some suggestions to help navigate these impacts of screens is to really try to have either no screens or very minimal screens around infants and toddlers, as well as trying to support co-regulation of emotions and trying to teach your infants and toddlers appropriate emotional responses in certain situations. And just really trying to interact with your child in various ways. So reading with them, singing with them, and encouraging that more exploration and play-like behavior and learning. And at this specific stage, it is suggested specifically for TV that they're not having any more or less than 1 hour of day. And this should be, or it's suggested to be in an educational, age-appropriate way with an adult present. So those are some of the suggestions for this stage.
And then the kids move to kindergarten. And I gotta be honest, that is a big change for a lot of kids. Big classes, lots of toys that aren't the ones you're used to, and learning how to interact with other kids. So, in those 2 years of kindergarten, honestly, the language development, the motor skill development is incredible. Lots of exploration, working with different tools. Pretend play. I just love this picture of this little kid. Their pretend play is huge, right? Imagination, creativity, and interacting with other kids. And so we see a lot of learning about regulation, turn taking, understanding the perspective of other people develop in kindergarten because you're really developmentally young, right? You're thinking about yourself, and that makes sense in what you want and what you want to do. But being able to calm yourself when you're frustrated, being able to separate from your parents, being able to manage that upset and calming down in a reasonable amount of time. So when we have screens, sometimes that can impact kids' ability to interpret other people's perspective or the fact that they think differently than you do. The attention span, this is something you're going to hear through the entire age range. Being able to sustain your attention as a young child, you're only really expected a small amount, but it builds over time. And so it is a muscle to be worked. Sometimes what we see and what I think we've all lived, or many of us have lived, is in times of dysregulation, young kids having a screen around is a distraction and it stops the emotional upset. And when we use screens as a calming tool, sometimes you're not learning those other skills. So that is the consideration. How do you balance those two things? Sometimes you're in a restaurant and you just need things to settle, but when you're at home and you have the time, it's helpful to work in those strategies on how to manage those big emotions. Um, so suggestions, honestly, some of the things that Alexis already said, encouraging outside play, encouraging time with other kids, encouraging practice of things that take a little bit of effort. So some chores at home or some reading together, building language skills, talking about the things around you. One of the ones that I really loved as a suggestion is having TV on with educational programming. So again, limiting that to, just an hour or two a day, whatever it is, but having closed captioning on. I don't know about you, but if you've ever had a TV where it's reading to you, it is hard not to read it, right? Your eyes immediately go there, and that will develop some reading and it makes the connection between language and text, which I just thought was a neat sidebar, kind of a teachable moment.
Okay, so the next stage, elementary, ages 6 to 10. So during this time, kids are really learning to express their thoughts and their feelings in more effective ways rather than having these bigger outbursts or tantrums. So they're really learning to express them in more effective ways to other people. Um, they're starting to follow rules and learn how to take turns in their peer interactions. And so this requires patience and impulse control to be able to wait your turn in these interactions. This is also a stage where their attention, they can keep it for 5 to 10 minutes in a non-screen activity. So we're seeing that attention skill developing for a bit longer periods at this stage. And so screens and technology can impact these impulse control and attention skills. Um, and it also can distract from real life interactions and independence. So if kids are sitting on screens, this is pulling them away from learning these skills in real life interactions with their peers, learning how to take their turn when talking to someone else, those kinds of things. It also can impact the ability for them to read facial expressions and develop empathy for other people. So getting at that again, interactions, real life interactions that wouldn't be as present or as prominent on screens. We're starting to see at this stage that it can impact their posture as well. So just having like not great posture, as I'm sure a lot of us notice when we're sitting on our screens, we realize all of a sudden that we're hunched over. And this is also a stage where there's potential for exposure to inappropriate content online. And so this is where you're starting to see some of that come up. And so some of the suggestions, again, are similar to some of the other stages that we've already gone over. But no screens is suggested in bedrooms and shutting off the screens 1 hour before bed, just to give kids that time to just relax and wind down before bed and not having a screen in their face. Modeling healthy screen use. Again, this is consistent throughout the age ranges that we've discussed and will be discussing. Utilizing parental controls for certain platforms and different technologies. As well as introducing safe internet use and demonstrating what that looks like, which we'll get into a bit more details about that in the coming stages. And then just teaching your kids about respect and empathy and responsibility and what that looks like and what helping others looks like. And then encouraging patience and turn taking, so modeling that as well. And again, encouraging outdoor play with other kids. So replacing the screen use with other activities that they're able to engage with other kids in.
I know we're going to the middle school years, but can I just tell you, as I'm listening to Alexis and I'm saying these things, I'm having moments about my own technology use, and I'm thinking, oh, yep, okay. So that's just naming that while we're here. Okay, middle school is such a big age. They only have 2 years for this one, but I love this picture of the girls have the sleepover, right? Like that is the development and the progression is so significant in this age level that I just think it's worthy of its own conversation. So friendships change, they become more complex. You're starting to get more peer influence and separating from your family, right? Peer pressure comes up and sensitive to kind of how other people are behaving and how you want to be seen similar to them. Starting to develop conflict resolution strategies, which is so important moving into adulthood. And I mean, middle school drama, right? Like there's all that kind of you're learning at that point, starting to see other people's points of view. And also, I mean, if we think about when puberty's hitting, thinking about their bodies, right? And so that leads me right into thinking about where screens factor in. As kids are getting older, they're getting more exposure to a variety of online influences and are likely to see stereotypes. They're going to see unhealthy and risky behaviors, body image, self-injury, um, some ridiculousness online that people think is so entertaining. I have a boy and a girl. Sorry, I see both sides of these activities here. In terms of kind of what is funny and what is maybe put on, but you think at this young age that I would want to do that too. Um, Not seeing the nuance. I think this is a big one for me as kids are getting older, just talking about what they see online. And do you think that was set up? Do you think that was real? Do you think, those kind of questions about performance for online content? So thinking about the 11 to 12-year-olds, if they need a phone, if they're getting something to be able to have contact with you for safety reasons, not having data, so that you do have the opportunity to limit what they have access to, thinking about where they're using their phone, their screen, and the time of day they're using it. So again, thinking about that before bedtime, thinking about being in a public place in the home as opposed to in the bedroom with the door shut. Thinking about passive use, which is in another one of the webinars, or the lunch and learns that was just posted yesterday, so it's hot off the presses, looking at navigating online use and encouraging really a balanced approach, thinking about relationships online, your friendships that you're making maybe through games or through online platforms, but also who are the people you're seeing in person so that you have a balance of both of those because how you interact socially is so different in those two settings.
High school, so 13 to 16 years old. There's a lot going on during this phase of life. So this is really when relationships are becoming um, more romantic, more sexual for kids. They're developing a deeper capacity for intimate relationships. And this is really a stage where there's a lot of hormonal changes going on. So um, teens are having bigger feelings, and there's just a lot going on, and in terms of the feelings that are developing. And this tends to or can drive decision making during this stage, which can make teens a bit more impulsive during this particular stage. This is also a time that they're really looking for increased independence and autonomy from their parents, but also finding their sense of self aside from their friend group and their peers. So really trying to, figure out who they are and what is a part of their identity. It's also a time that they're establishing executive functioning skills related to schoolwork. So things like planning and prioritizing their schoolwork with all the other demands that are going on their day to day, and balancing these workloads with school and everything else. They also can consider big picture things, but can sometimes lack the ability to apply that in the moment. And that kind of ties into maybe the more impulsive behaviors that we see during this stage. And because this is a stage where teens are really, they're how people perceive them or think about them, it's starting to get heightened during this stage. So online content that they're seeing can really impact their self-esteem, or it's more amplified during this time period. There's an increased exposure to distorted or inappropriate content. So these are things like they might be seeing substance use online, risky behaviors like more sexual or harmful behaviors online. And so during this stage, the presence of screens and technology can really can interrupt or impact their ability to communicate effectively, and be attentive. And it can reduce their ability to plan ahead and organize their time, going back to interrupting those executive functioning skills that are continuing to develop during this time. Screens and technology may impact the ability for them to be present where they are and who they're with. And this also can impact their posture and their spinal development, again, if they're sitting particularly for long periods of time on screens, on their phones or on their computer. So for some of the suggestions, there's a lot of the same things that we're finding in the other stages again. So trying to not have phones or TVs in their bedrooms, no screens 1 hour before bedtime. Again, just so they have that time to relax before bed and not have their brains going and with all the content that they may be seeing online. And it's also suggested for them to have no more than 2 hours of sedentary use. So 2 hours of just recreational use on their screens, whether it's computers or phones. Again, modeling appropriate use to your teens. And during this stage, it becomes really important to consider putting limits on things like chat functions and social media platforms, especially ones that encourage excessive use. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with TikTok, the platform, and so this is one that is quite well known to encourage that excessive use, particularly during this stage in time. It's also suggested, and it's important to start discussing topics with your teens about what inappropriate texting might look like, or putting risky behavior or information online, and what are some of the reputational consequences of these things if they're putting private information out into the world for anyone to see. Because this is a time where you see cyber grooming, it's amplified during this time. So strangers grooming young people. So really trying to demonstrate and talk with your teens about what safe friendships might look like online. And also talking with your child about their emotions and their feelings surrounding their social media use. What is their experience like on these different platforms, and just overall their experience online. And then again, encouraging those activities and hobbies outside of screen use. So encouraging artistic or musical or creative pursuits, and trying to replace the screen use or balance it with those things.
I am aware of the time, and so I'm going to cut this one a little bit short in terms of after high school. I think what I really want to highlight here is that these are conversations you're having now with an adult. What are the impacts? What are you seeing? They're going to make their own choices in terms of what they're doing most of the time as they're getting past 17. But I think this is where you have those value conversations about what is right and wrong. How do you feel about what you're seeing? What do you believe? What do you want to do with your life? What are people seeing of you online? And how do you want to interact with the world? And I think that having conversations about algorithms, about polarization, about the content that you're seeing and how you're feeling about it and the why behind it. I think that at this age, you want them to be thinking about how to look at it, not trying to put the limit on exactly how many hours or whatnot. Really having those conversations about, again, the nuance. Take a step back and see how is it affecting your relationships? How is it affecting your ability to be part of a club? Like, what are those pieces? Um, because that's what you want as you're sending them off into the world when they're moving away from you. So sorry, Alexis, I went quick on that one.
No.
Oh, addictive behaviors mentioned. That's right. So the dopamine session was really good about that in terms of how algorithms and how different online platforms are working with the brain. So I will leave that one to the other session. Go for it.
So that wraps up the specific developmental stages. So like we've seen throughout the stages, there's some key takeaways or patterns that we see in terms of suggestions to help your kids navigate screens. So really modeling appropriate screen use. So modeling that balancing, not trying not to engage in excessive screen use, turning off the screens when they're not in use, as well as setting limits and monitoring what your kids are doing, limiting certain platforms, time limits as well on the screens, both phones and TVs. And really having an open dialogue with your kids about why certain things are appropriate and why they're not at these particular stages that they're at, and really just trying to be open and communicative with your kids about their experience with their screen use. And then across the board, trying to encourage a variety of activities. So promoting those other skills and activities that balance out the screen use for your kids.
So do you want to learn more? This was a quick dive into a variety of topics. So what we have, I've posted the PDF of the slides so that you'll have all of these links. So Jake Ernst has his own website and also works through Straight Up Health. School Mental Health Ontario has some nice handouts. I like this one about how to manage. It talks about a list of what you're watching for problematic screen use. What are some of the things you want to watch for? And then we've got a number of website or another number of videos on YouTube right now. The two most recent are Get Off Your Phone, Dopamine and Screen Addiction. Then the last one was Navigating Online Use. And the second two are from other years. So, Alexis, anything extra you want to add, or should we move to
Oh,
questions?
I think that's, yeah, I think that's good. I think it wraps it up.